My girlfriend and I had been together for 3 years, and until recently, I thought we were solid. Like every couple, we had ups and downs, but I believed we could work through anything. However, about 6 months ago, I started noticing changes in our relationship. We weren't as close as we used to be. The intimacy that once brought us together seemed to fade, and even the way we talked to each other felt strained. I'll admit that much of the blame falls on me. Work became more demanding than ever, and family issues added stress I didn't know how to handle. In the middle of everything, our relationship took a back seat. I wasn't as present as I should have been, and I know my actions or lack thereof hurt her. We talked about it one night after an argument. I promised her I'd do better, that I'd find a way to balance everything. She said she understood, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. It felt like I was making a promise I wasn't entirely sure I could keep, but I loved her deeply. I didn't want to lose her, so I tried to make things better. For a while, it seemed like we were on the right track. We spent more time together, and I thought the distance between us was shrinking. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was like a shadow hanging over us, one I didn't know how to get rid of. Last night, my girlfriend told me she was going to a club with her friends after work. This wasn't unusual, as she often went out with them to blow off steam, and I never had a reason to question her. I wished her a good time and went about my evening. Around 11 p.m., my phone buzzed with a series of texts from my sister. Her first message was straightforward. "I just saw your girlfriend at the club." That caught my attention, but it was the next message that stopped me in my tracks. "She's with your friend." They were making out. I stared at my phone, trying to process what I'd just read. My sister had a reputation for being blunt, but this? It felt too wild to be true. I replied immediately, asking if she was sure. She said she was and claimed she tried to take a photo as proof, but by the time she got her phone out, my girlfriend and my friend had already stopped. She did manage to snap a few pictures of them dancing closely. When she sent them to me, my stomach churned. The way they were pressed together, the smiles on their faces, it didn't look like innocent dancing. It looked intimate. I asked my sister if she saw them leave together, but she wasn't sure. That's when my doubts crept in. Could my sister be exaggerating? She had her reasons to hold a grudge against my friend. 4 years ago, she had confessed to having a crush on him. He rejected her in the harshest way possible, telling her she wasn't his type and was too young for him. The rejection crushed her. She refused to speak to him for months and avoided being around him for over a year. Eventually, she moved past it, but I always sensed lingering resentment. Could this be her way of getting back at him? And if so, why drag my girlfriend into it? As for her relationship with my girlfriend, it had always been cordial but distant. They weren't particularly close, but there was no obvious animosity between them either. I couldn't think of any reason my sister would lie about something so serious, but the thought lingered in my mind. The next morning, I decided I couldn't let it go. I sent the photos my sister had taken to both my girlfriend and my friend, asking for an explanation. They responded quickly, but with the same story. They insisted they were just dancing and that nothing inappropriate had happened. I told them the way they looked in the photos made me uncomfortable. My girlfriend dismissed my concerns outright, accusing me of being paranoid. When I mentioned what my sister claimed to have seen, she became defensive. The conversation escalated into an argument, and before I knew it, she gave me an ultimatum. Either you believe me, or you believe her. I told her I needed time to think. She rolled her eyes and muttered, "Whatever." before hanging up on me. I turned to my friend for answers, messaging him privately. I begged him to tell me the truth, but instead of a response, I got silence. Hours passed, and he still hadn't replied. His lack of response felt like an admission of guilt. The silence from my friend drove me mad. This was someone I'd trusted for years, someone I considered a brother. The idea that he could betray me in such a way was unthinkable. But as the hours ticked by, my mind began piecing together little moments that I'd previously brushed off as nothing. I remembered the times he'd been overly friendly with my girlfriend at gatherings. The way he'd compliment her, the way his eyes lingered on her longer than they should have. At the time, I'd convinced myself I was imagining it, that I was being insecure. But now, those memories felt like red flags I had ignored. My girlfriend's behavior over the past few months also began to make sense in a twisted way. The distance, the lack of intimacy, the way she'd become defensive whenever I brought up our issues. Was it all because of him? Was she pulling away because she was guilty? The thought gnawed at me, and I couldn't shake it. That evening, I decided to confront her in person. I showed up at her apartment unannounced, and the look of surprise on her face told me she hadn't expected me. I asked her again, point blank, if there was something going on between her and my friend. She sighed heavily, as if the weight of the question was too much to bear. "How many times do I have to tell you?" "Nothing happened," she said, her voice laced with frustration. "Then why won't he answer me?" I shot back. "If there's nothing to hide, why is he avoiding me?" She didn't have an answer. Instead, she turned the conversation back on me, accusing me of not trusting her, of letting my sister get into my head. "Do you even want to be in this relationship anymore?" she asked, her tone sharp. I was taken aback by the question. Of course, I wanted to be in the relationship. I loved her, but how could I stay when doubt had begun to poison everything between us? I told her I needed time to process everything, and she nodded, though her expression was icy. As I left her apartment, I couldn't help but feel like something was irreparably broken. The trust that had once been the foundation of our relationship was gone, replaced by suspicion and unease. That night, I finally got a message from my friend. His response was short and dismissive. "You're being ridiculous." Nothing happened, but it wasn't enough. The words felt hollow, and his refusal to address the situation directly only fueled my doubts. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I reached out to one of our mutual friends who had been at the club that night, hoping they could provide some clarity. What I learned from them only added to my turmoil. They confirmed seeing my girlfriend and my friend dancing together, but couldn't say whether it had crossed a line. They looked close, but maybe it was just the vibe of the place, they said, their tone uncertain. Close. That word echoed in my mind. How close is too close when you're in a committed relationship? I didn't have an answer, but I knew my instincts were screaming at me that something wasn't right. Over the next few days, I found myself replaying every interaction, every conversation, and every moment that could provide a clue. I felt like a detective piecing together a puzzle I didn't want to solve. My girlfriend's continued defensiveness and my friend's evasiveness only added to the weight on my chest. Finally, I realized I couldn't live like this in a state of constant doubt and unease. I sat down with my girlfriend one last time and told her how I felt. I told her I needed honesty, no matter how painful it might be. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "I've already told you the truth. If you can't believe me, then maybe we shouldn't be together." Her words cut deep, But in that moment, I knew she was right. Trust is the cornerstone of any relationship, and without it, we had nothing. I told her I loved her, but that I couldn't continue in a relationship where doubt and mistrust had taken root. We ended things that night, and as painful as it was, I felt a strange sense of relief. The uncertainty was over, even if it wasn't the resolution I had hoped for. As for my friend, I haven't spoken to him since. Some betrayals, whether real or imagined, leave wounds too deep to heal. I was torn. I didn't want to believe my sister would make up something so serious, but a small part of me couldn't ignore the possibility that she might be exaggerating or worse, lying to get revenge on my friend for rejecting her years ago. For days, I wrestled with the weight of her words. The trust I had in my sister clashed with the loyalty I felt toward my girlfriend and my best friend. The silence from both of them only made things worse. Neither my girlfriend nor my friend contacted me. The deafening quiet left a void that my mind eagerly filled with scenarios, each one worse than the last. Was my sister right? Was she wrong? The uncertainty was eating me alive. Finally, I decided I couldn't live in limbo anymore. I sent them both a message, short and direct. I just want the truth, no matter what it is. The ball was in their court now. Hours felt like days, but eventually, they both agreed to meet me. When we sat down at a quiet cafe, the tension in the air was almost unbearable. My girlfriend's hands trembled as she clutched her coffee cup, and my friend avoided eye contact, staring at the table as though it held the answers to life's greatest mysteries. And then, the truth came out. It was worse than I had imagined. 4 months ago, after one of the worst fights my girlfriend and I had ever had a fight, I barely even remembered she ran into my friend. She told me he had noticed she was upset and offered to take her out for lunch to talk. What started as a kind gesture turned into something far more complicated. They admitted they'd exchanged numbers after that lunch. 2 weeks later, while I was away on a fishing trip with some friends, she texted him. From then on, they began texting daily. What started as casual messages turned into something more intense, more personal. 2 or 3 times a week, they met up, sometimes for coffee, sometimes for dinner. According to them, the night at the club wasn't the first time they'd been intimate. It had been going on for months. My girlfriend, in her attempt to be honest, explained how she felt neglected by me over the past 6 months. She described feeling like I was emotionally distant, even when I thought things were fine between us. She said that while I believed our relationship had improved after our last big talk, it hadn't. According to her, the improvement only lasted 3 weeks before things went back to how they were. I listened in stunned silence, trying to process her words. Then I asked the question that had been clawing at my chest since the beginning. If you were so unhappy, why didn't you just end things with me? She hesitated, then admitted she had messed up. But what shocked me was how she still managed to place some of the blame on me, saying I had made her feel unloved. My friend sat quietly for most of this, but when I turned to him and asked if their relationship was purely physical or if there were feelings involved, he looked me in the eye and said, "We have feelings for each other." That was the moment my heart shattered into a million pieces. I asked them why they lied when I confronted them with the photos. My girlfriend said they panicked and didn't know how to tell me the truth. My friend added that they were scared of losing me, which felt like a slap in the face. How could he be scared of losing me while actively betraying me? But the worst blow came when my friend apologized for how things had unfolded and then said, "I don't regret being with her." That was the final straw. I stood up, shaking with anger. and told them both to leave. "I don't want to see or hear from either of you ever again," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but laced with enough venom to make them flinch. They tried to explain themselves further, but I wasn't interested. That night, I tried to numb the pain by scrolling aimlessly through social media. Big mistake. My ex-girlfriend had posted a picture of herself with my former best friend. They were smiling, arms around each other, looking like they didn't have a care in the world. The comments were a mix of congratulations and compliments. "You two look so happy together," one person wrote. Another asked, "What happened to me?" Seeing how easily they had moved on while I was left picking up the pieces was gut-wrenching. It felt like a knife twisting in my already battered heart. The next morning, I reached out to my sister to apologize for doubting her. She was gracious about it, telling me she didn't mind as long as I had found out the truth. "You deserve better than both of them," she said. And for the first time in days, I felt a small glimmer of comfort. Now, I'm trying to focus on healing. Some of my friends have suggested therapy, and while I've never been one to talk about my feelings, I'm seriously considering it. I've also been spending more time with family and reconnecting with hobbies I'd neglected during my relationship. Looking back, I realize how much I overlooked in my relationship. There were signs, small ones, that something was wrong, but I ignored them because I didn't want to face the possibility that the person I loved might betray me. For example, I remember how my girlfriend started being more secretive with her phone, or how she seemed distant even when we were spending time together. At the time, I chalked it up to stress or mood swings. I didn't want to believe it could be something more. This experience has been incredibly painful, but it's also been a lesson. I've learned the importance of communication, trust, and paying attention to the dynamics in my relationships. Most importantly, I've learned to trust my instincts. As for my ex-girlfriend and my ex-friend, they're out of my life for good, and that's where they'll stay. I've started journaling as a way to process my emotions, and it's helping me piece myself back together. Some days are harder than others, but I remind myself that healing isn't linear. There are good days, bad days, and everything in between. I've also been leaning on my sister for support. She's been a rock for me through all of this, offering advice and reminding me that I'm not alone. For all our past disagreements, I'm grateful to have her in my corner. Moving forward, I'm staying single and focusing on myself. I don't want to rush into another relationship until I've fully healed and worked through the issues that led to this mess. For now, my priority is rebuilding my self-esteem and learning to love myself again. This chapter of my life has been filled with heartbreak and betrayal, but it's also been a turning point. I've learned who my true friends are and what I deserve in a relationship. And while it hurts to have lost two people I cared deeply about, I know I'm better off without them. They say time heals all wounds, and I'm starting to believe that's true. With each passing day, the pain lessens, and I feel a little stronger. I'm not there yet, but I'm on my way. For anyone going through something similar, know this: you are stronger than you think, and you deserve better. Betrayal may break you temporarily, but it doesn't define you. What defines you is how you choose to rise from it. As for me, I'm choosing to rise.